This time we round up our classic motorcycle A to Z series with the letters Y and Z. The Yale motorcycles were produced by the Yale Lock Company of Toledo, Ohio in the United States between 1902 and 1915. Throughout its run, the company produced two basic models. There was a 6.5 horsepower V-twin, or 5.5 horsepower narrow angle V-twin as we can see here, and a 3.5 horsepower rated single cylinder unit. The engines featured an inlet over exhaust valve system, or F-head as it's sometimes called. The engines featured a glass window to inspect oil level, and final drive was via a belt, although on some machines, as on this one, a lever could be pulled to provide some sort of CVT gearing, which made climbing hills an awful lot easier. The chassis featured Sega front spring forks and a rigid rear end, and some frame parts were designed to be easily replaceable. One interesting and slightly over-engineered element of the machine was its twist grip throttle. Instead of using a cable, like pretty much any other machine on the market, this machine used a series of intricate connected rods, around 12 in all, with linkages. And this and a number of other features made the machine complex and therefore expensive to manufacture. However, Yale would continue to produce bikes for a number of years in the Edwardian period, finally finishing production in 1915. Yamaha is a large Japanese production company whose original products had been musical instruments, hence the tuning fork on the company emblem. Although of course the company would later diversify into the production of electronics and motorcycles, with the first successful machine being based on the DKW RT125, like so many others out there, BSA and Harley Davidson making versions too of course, and let's not forget MZ. Not surprisingly, Yamaha did concentrate their early efforts on the production of two-stroke machines, with these small parallel twin 100cc units being one of their early successes, a machine which would feature auto lube, although contrary to popular belief it was not the first machine to feature a throttle controlled lubrication system. That actually went way back to the Velocette GTP of the late 20s and early 30s. It seems nothing in life is ever original. Another popular early machine was the YD series. These 250cc machines featured a piston-ported, air-cooled parallel twin machine with a bore stroke of 54 by 54, very common dimensions for 125 barrels at this time. Matching designs from Adler and Ariel for example, but also found on much later machines, with the dimensions still commonplace on Japanese two-strokes well into the 1990s. And these early YDs would be very popular endurance races in Japan, being able to outperform Honda's RC71 in pretty much all areas, both in cornering and in acceleration. During the late 60s and into the 70s, Yamaha would find considerable success in the off-road market in the USA, where the demand for cheap, capable dirt bikes exploded during this period. Into the 70s, and Yamaha developed a completely new range of air-cooled parallel twins, which in many markets would be known as the RD, the RD of course standing for race development. This new range of machines would feature reed valve induction, and would range in capacity from the learner-friendly 125 to the commuter-friendly 200cc, as well as the rather more sporty 350 and 400cc bikes. But by the late 70s, Yamaha began to realise that they were pushing their two-stroke air-cooled units beyond their limits of reliability, and so would introduce the LCs, a range of liquid-cooled models in 250 and 350cc parallel twin forms, which would offer new levels of performance for lightweight machines, so much in fact that it would kill off the 250 as a learner-legal machine in the United Kingdom. But for many, two-stroke machines are always a little bit niche, and the oil crisis of the early 70s would permanently damage the sales of large capacity two-strokes. But Yamaha had an alternative. They'd introduced the XX650, essentially a machine very much influenced by British practices with a 360 crank, but also now with unit construction and a clean single overhead cam. The 650 would prove successful in the marketplace, if only because not everybody was in the market for a 4-cylinder. There would be later more advanced XS models, but the 3-cylinder machines and the dual overhead cam parallel twins were blighted by early problems and not as successful as had been hoped, while the 1104 was a monster. The XS would give way to the XJ range in the early 80s, and this lighter, more refined range of 4s would prove very successful for Yamaha, being available from 400cc upwards, although the 600 and 900 were very much classics of the era, and could be a great choice if you're into 80s classics. But you can't mention 80s Yamaha without thinking about the VMAX, a true monster of a V4, which was impressive in pretty much all dimensions. It was heavy, it was big, but above all it was very powerful by the standards of the time, and accelerated like nothing on earth. The true nutter's choice. But the late 80s and early 90s would be the era of the race replica, and Yamaha were very well placed, replacing the XJs with the FZ and later FZR series, with these screaming 4-cylinder motors being available from 250 all the way up to the 1000cc X-Up model. And the FZs offered a great balance of all-round performance. Their engines were not always the most powerful in class, but this was offset by lightweight and excellent road manners. And the Elite Class FZR is often one of the truly forgotten classics of the early superbike era, with people often focusing on the later R1. But the machine offered fine steering, and that 5-valve per cylinder engine was a true cracker. But there's always the odd setback with any company, and for Yamaha it came in the form of the GTS. With its innovative front suspension system, the machine was never a big seller. As ever, the motorcycle in public can be a conservative lot at times. Today's Yamaha's range, whilst aesthetically not being to everybody's taste, is certainly technically interesting, with a range of parallel twins, 3 cylinders and 4-cylinder machines available. But for me, Yamaha was at their best making sports bikes, and their modern R range represents some of the prettiest bikes available today. Established in 1903 by W.G. Bowers, Zenith Motorcycles was based in Finsbury Park, London, England, and as the name suggests, was a high-class machine intended for the discerning rider. In 1905, one Freddie Barnes was hired as chief engineer, and he would patent the Gradua transmission system. Essentially this used the belt drive as a sort of CVT, with the rider operating a large lever to move the CBT drum in and out, just like on a scooter, or indeed a snowmobile. Cleverly, the system also moved the rear wheel fore and aft to maintain belt tension. And so effective was the system that it would last until 1924, when it was replaced by the now ubiquitous all-chain drive with gearbox systems. As a small company, Zenith did not produce their own power units, instead using motors from a number of manufacturers. In 1914, the company would move to the Brooklands race circuit, where they would go on to set a number of speed records. However, the dawn of the Great Depression would bring about the end of Zenith in 1931, although there would be a brief post-war revival between 1947 and 1950. Well, hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.